You walk outside early in the morning, maybe with a cup of tea or coffee in your hand, expecting to enjoy your plants. You've watered them, cared for them, maybe even talked to them a little. But the moment you lean in closer, your stomach drops. Tiny green or white insects are everywhere, clinging to stems, hiding under leaves, multiplying faster than you can think. You try to brush them off, your fingers get sticky, you rinse the leaves with water. It feels like progress for a moment, but deep down you already know what's going to happen. Tomorrow they'll be back, and not just back, worse. This is where most people give up, because it feels like no matter what you do, the pests always win. So you go to the store, you pick up a pesticide, maybe something labeled organic or fast-acting. You spray it carefully, trying not to breathe it in. You wonder if it's safe for your kids, your pets, yourself. You look at your vegetables and quietly ask, "Can I even eat these anymore?" And then comes the worst part. A few days later, the bugs return anyway. That's the moment most gardeners hit a wall, not because they're lazy, not because they don't care, but because they've been using solutions that don't actually solve the problem. They only delay it. Here's the truth that almost nobody tells you. Most pest control methods don't kill the root of the problem. They either annoy the insects or temporarily reduce their numbers, but they don't stop the cycle. Eggs hatch, colonies rebuild, and you're stuck in a loop. That's why you feel like you're always fighting, but never winning. But what if the answer wasn't in a $20 bottle? What if it was already sitting in your kitchen? Not some rare chemical, not a complicated formula, just something simple, cheap, and surprisingly powerful. Because there is one ingredient that changes everything. When used correctly, it doesn't just reduce pests. It destroys them on contact and creates a barrier that keeps them away. And almost nobody uses it properly. That's the difference between success and failure. In this video, you're going to learn exactly how to turn that one ingredient into a powerful pest-killing solution. You'll see why it works when others fail. And more importantly, you'll learn the exact way to use it so you don't accidentally damage your plants. Because yes, there is a right way and a very wrong way, and if you get it wrong, you won't just lose the pests, you could lose the plant. So stay with me, because what you're about to learn can completely change how you protect your garden. Let's start with the secret. The ingredient is garlic powder. Sounds too simple, right? That's exactly why most people ignore it. But garlic contains a natural compound that is extremely effective against soft-bodied insects. These are the pests that cause the most frustration: aphids, mealybugs, whiteflies, and even ants in certain situations. These insects rely on a thin outer layer to survive. It protects them and helps them retain moisture. Garlic disrupts that layer. Once that protection is gone, the insect quickly dehydrates and dies. And it happens fast. But that's only half of what makes garlic so powerful. The other half is what it leaves behind. When applied correctly, it creates a thin, invisible layer on your plant's surface. You won't see it, but insects can detect it immediately. The smell and compounds act like a warning signal. To them, your plant becomes a place to avoid. It's not just killing pests, it's telling new ones not to come back. Now here's where most people mess up. They hear garlic and they go straight to extremes. They crush fresh cloves. They sprinkle powder directly on leaves. They mix random amounts and hope for the best. And that's exactly how plants get damaged, because garlic alone is not the solution. It needs to be balanced, it needs to be carried properly, and it needs something that helps it stick. Without those, you don't get results. You get problems. So instead of guessing, you're going to follow a simple, precise method that actually works. Not something complicated, just something done correctly. Because in gardening, small details create big outcomes. And once you understand those details, everything starts to change. Now that you know why garlic works, it's time to turn it into something you can actually use. This is where precision matters. because the difference between a powerful solution and a harmful one comes down to how you mix it. You only need three things: water, garlic powder, and a gentle dish soap. That's it, but each one plays a specific role. The water acts as your base. It carries everything and helps distribute the mixture evenly across your plant. But here's something most people don't realize. Fresh tap water contains chlorine, and chlorine can weaken the natural compounds in garlic. So instead of using it straight from the tap, let it sit in an open container for about a day. This allows the chlorine to evaporate. It's a small step, but it makes a real difference. Next comes the garlic powder. This is your active ingredient. This is what actually affects the insects. You don't need a lot. In fact, using too much is one of the fastest ways to damage your plant. More is not better here. The goal is balance. Then comes the dish soap. This might seem like a minor addition, but it's critical. Without it, your mixture won't stick properly. It will just roll off the leaves, especially if the surface is slightly waxy. The soap breaks the surface tension. It allows the liquid to spread and cling to both the plant and the insects. Think of it as the glue that holds everything together. When combined correctly, these three ingredients create a solution that spreads evenly, sticks effectively, and works quickly. But mixing them carelessly ruins the entire effect. So take your time with this part. Start by pouring your prepared water into a container. Add the garlic powder slowly and stir continuously. You want it to dissolve as much as possible. No clumps sitting at the bottom. Once that's done, add the dish soap gently. Stir again, but don't shake aggressively. You don't want to create excessive foam. When everything is mixed into a smooth solution, pour it into a spray bottle. And just like that, you've created something far more effective than most store-bought sprays. But here's the part most people overlook. Making the solution is only half the battle. How you apply it determines whether it works or fails completely. Because even the perfect mixture can do nothing if used incorrectly. Or worse, it can harm your plants. Timing matters. Angle matters. Coverage matters. And in the next part, you're going to see exactly how to apply it the right way. You'll also learn the three biggest mistakes that destroy results and how to avoid them completely. Because once you fix those mistakes, everything changes. Pests don't come back the same way, and your garden finally starts to feel under control. Now comes the part where most people unknowingly sabotage everything they just prepared. Application. You could have the perfect mixture sitting in your spray bottle, balanced and ready. But if you spray it the wrong way, at the wrong time, or in the wrong place, you won't get the results you're expecting. In fact, you might end up thinking this method doesn't work at all. But it's not the method that fails, it's the execution. So picture this: you pick up your spray bottle and walk toward your plant. The first instinct is to spray what you can see, the top of the leaves, the obvious areas, the visible damage. And that feels logical, but it's also the biggest mistake, because the majority of pests are not sitting out in the open. They're hiding. Flip a leaf over and you'll see what's really going on. Clusters of insects tucked underneath, feeding quietly where they're protected from sunlight, water, and most sprays. This is where they live. This is where they reproduce. If you ignore this area, you're leaving most of the problem untouched. So when you spray, you don't just miss the top. You gently lift each leaf and target the underside. That's where your attention needs to go. And yes, it takes a little more time. But those extra minutes are the difference between partial success and complete control. Now let's talk about distance. If you spray too close, the liquid pools. It becomes heavy, and instead of coating the surface, it overwhelms it. If you spray too far, the mist becomes too fine and drifts away before it lands properly. You want to stay in that middle range, close enough to coat, far enough to spread. As you spray, watch the leaves carefully. You're not trying to soak them. You're aiming for a thin, even layer, tiny droplets forming across the surface. That's when you know you've done it right. But even if you do all of this perfectly, there's still one factor that can undo everything. Time of day. This is where a lot of damage happens without people realizing why. If you spray during the hottest part of the day, when the sun is high and intense, you create a dangerous combination. The liquid on the leaves, mixed with heat and sunlight, can act like a magnifier. Instead of helping your plant, it stresses it. Leaves can develop spots, edges can dry out. In severe cases, the plant looks worse after treatment than before. And that's frustrating, because it feels like the solution caused the problem. But the truth is, it was just applied at the wrong time. The safest window is when the sun is low and gentle, early morning or late afternoon. During these hours, the plant can absorb the treatment without being stressed. It has time to dry naturally. It has time to respond. And that's exactly what you want. Now, there's one more thing that often gets ignored: consistency. Most people spray once, see improvement and stop. And for a day or two, everything looks fine. Then suddenly, the pests are back. This isn't failure. It's just the life cycle continuing. Because while you eliminated the visible insects, there are still eggs waiting to hatch. And those eggs don't care that you sprayed once. They're on their own schedule. So if you stop too early, you're only solving half the problem. And that's why this next step is so important. To truly break the cycle, you need to think beyond a single application. You need a short, simple system, not something complicated, just something consistent. When you spray the first time, you're targeting the active pests, the ones feeding, moving, and visible. That's your first layer of control, but hidden among those leaves are eggs, tiny, almost invisible, and within a few days, they hatch. If nothing interrupts that second wave, your problem resets. That's why timing your follow-up matters so much. A few days after your first application, you spray again. This time you're targeting the new generation, the ones that didn't exist during your first treatment. This is where most infestations are either stopped or allowed to rebuild, and then comes the third round. By now, you're not just reacting, you're preventing. You're creating an environment where pests struggle to establish themselves at all. This final application acts like a barrier, a lingering presence that discourages new insects from settling in. It's subtle, but powerful. And once this cycle is complete, something interesting happens. Your plant starts to recover. New growth appears cleaner, leaves look healthier, the constant stress fades. Instead of fighting every few days, you move into maintenance, and maintenance is easier. But here's where things get even more effective, because not all plants behave the same way. Some are delicate, some are tough, some hold moisture longer, while others dry quickly. And if you treat them all exactly the same, you can run into problems. So instead of using one rigid approach, you adjust slightly based on what you're growing. If your plant has soft, thin leaves, you go lighter. A fine mist instead of a heavy spray. Just enough to coat without overwhelming. If your plant has thicker leaves or stronger stems, you can be a bit more thorough. Still controlled, but with more coverage. And if you're dealing with larger plants, you expand your reach. Not just leaves, but stems, base areas, even the surrounding soil where pests sometimes gather. It's not about doing more, it's about doing it intelligently. Now let's address something that every gardener eventually faces. What happens when the infestation is already out of control? When you look at your plant and it feels like it's completely taken over, covered, overwhelmed, almost beyond saving. This is the moment where many people give up. But this is also where a clear, calm response can turn things around. Because even in severe cases, there's a way back. And in the next part, you're going to see exactly how to handle that situation step by step. Not with panic, but with control. Because no matter how bad it looks, there's still a way to recover your plant. You step into your garden, take one look at your plant, and it's completely covered. Not just a few insects here and there, but clusters, thick patches, Leaves curling, stems weakening, everything looking like it's under attack. This is the moment where most people assume it's too late. They think the plant is done, but in reality, this is where a focused response matters the most. Because when an infestation reaches this level, you don't start with the spray. You start with removal. Take your plant to a water source, a hose, a tap, even a sink if it's small enough. Use a steady stream of water and begin washing the plant down, not aggressively, but firmly enough to dislodge the insects. As the water hits the leaves, you'll see them fall away. Clusters break apart, stems start to clear. This one step alone can remove a large portion of the infestation in minutes, and that matters because it reduces the pressure immediately. Now look closely at the plant. If there are sections that are heavily damaged, leaves that are curled beyond recovery, or stems that are completely covered, it's better to remove them. It feels harsh, but it's strategic, because those areas are not just damaged, they're breeding grounds. By removing them, you're eliminating a large number of insects and eggs in one move. Once that's done, now you bring in your spray. This time you apply it thoroughly. Every remaining leaf, top and bottom, stems, even the base area. You're not just treating anymore, you're resetting the plant. And here's where things change slightly. Instead of waiting several days, you follow up sooner. A second application within a short gap helps catch anything that survived the first round. Then you return to your regular cycle. At this stage, consistency becomes your strongest tool, and something else becomes just as important. Isolation. If the infested plant is sitting next to healthy ones, the problem doesn't stay contained. Pests move, slowly but steadily, so if possible, separate the affected plant. Give it space. This prevents the infestation from spreading while you bring it under control. Within days, you'll start to see improvement. Leaves look cleaner. Movement slows. The plant begins to stabilize, and once it stabilizes, recovery begins. New growth comes in healthier, stronger, less vulnerable. This is how you turn around what looks like a lost cause, not by guessing, but by acting in the right order. And once you've handled a situation like this, something shifts in your mindset. You stop reacting emotionally, you start responding strategically, because now you know that even severe infestations can be reversed. But what if you could avoid reaching that point entirely? What if instead of reacting to pests, you made your garden naturally resistant to them? That's where the next layer comes in. Once you've handled pests directly, the smartest move is to make your garden a place they don't want to return to. Because control is good, but prevention is better, and this doesn't require chemicals or complicated systems. It starts with how your garden is set up. Certain plants naturally discourage pests, not by killing them, but by making the environment less attractive. Their scent, their oils, their presence sends subtle signals that insects avoid. When you place these plants near vulnerable ones, you create a kind of natural barrier, a protective zone. It doesn't eliminate every risk, but it reduces pressure significantly. Now combine that with awareness. Every time you bring a new plant into your space, you're introducing something unknown. It may look perfectly healthy, clean leaves, strong stems, but pests don't always show themselves immediately. Sometimes they're in early stages, eggs, tiny larvae, things you can't easily spot. And once that plant settles in, the problem spreads quietly. So instead of placing new plants directly into your garden, you give them a short period of observation. Keep them separate. Watch closely. If anything appears, you deal with it before it becomes a bigger issue. This one habit prevents a huge number of infestations. Then there's plant health. This is something many people underestimate. Pests are not random. They're attracted to weakness. A stressed plant sends out signals, not visible ones, but chemical ones. And insects are incredibly sensitive to them. They can detect when a plant is struggling. So if your plant is underwatered, overwatered, lacking nutrients, or sitting in poor soil, it becomes a target almost like an open invitation. But when a plant is strong, balanced, and healthy, it naturally resists pests better. Its structure is firmer, its defenses are stronger. It doesn't become an easy host, so simple things like proper watering, good drainage, and regular care make a massive difference. And then there's something most people never think about: rotation. If you use the same method over and over again without variation, pests can adapt, slowly but noticeably. So instead of relying on a single approach every time, you alternate occasionally. Not constantly, just enough to prevent patterns from forming. This keeps the environment unpredictable for pests. And when pests can't predict, they struggle to settle. All of this works together. Your spray handles the immediate threat. Your habits prevent future ones. Your garden becomes less reactive and more stable. And once you reach that point, something interesting happens. You stop feeling like you're constantly fighting your garden. Instead, it starts working with you. But there's still one important piece left. Because even with the best methods, people still make a few critical mistakes that undo everything. And in the next part, you'll see exactly what those mistakes are and how to avoid them completely. By now, you've seen how powerful this method can be when everything is done correctly. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most failures don't happen because the method is weak. They happen because of a few simple mistakes that seem harmless in the moment, but quietly undo everything. And the first mistake is impatience. You spray once, maybe twice, and expect the problem to disappear completely. When it doesn't, frustration kicks in. You start thinking this is just another thing that doesn't work. But pests don't operate on your timeline. They have cycles, stages, patterns that continue even after you've taken action. If you interrupt that cycle halfway, it restarts. That's why consistency matters more than intensity. It's not about how strong your spray is, it's about whether you follow through. The second mistake is overdoing it. This one surprises a lot of people. After seeing some success, the natural instinct is to increase the amount. More garlic, more soap, more spraying. It feels like you're strengthening the solution. But what you're actually doing is stressing the plant. Leaves can become coated too heavily. Breathing is affected. Moisture balance shifts. And instead of helping, you create a different kind of problem. Plants need treatment, not overload. And the third mistake is neglecting observation. This is subtle but critical. You spray, you walk away, and you assume everything is fine. But small signs start appearing. A few insects here, a cluster forming there. Early warnings. If you miss those signals, the problem builds quietly again. But if you catch them early, a light application is enough to stop everything before it grows. Observation turns reaction into prevention. Now here's something even more important. Not every pest responds the same way. This method works extremely well on soft-bodied insects, the ones that rely on a delicate outer layer. But some pests are different. They have harder shells, protective coatings, different behaviors. And if you try to use the same approach on everything, you'll run into confusion. So instead of assuming one solution fits all, you stay aware. If something doesn't respond after proper use, it's not failure. It's a sign that you're dealing with a different type of problem. And once you understand that, you adjust. That's what separates frustration from control. Now let's step back for a moment. Think about everything you've seen so far: a simple mixture, a precise method, a short cycle, a few smart habits. None of this is complicated. But together, it creates something powerful, because you're no longer guessing. You're acting with intention, and when you act with intention, results follow. But there's one more thing that makes this approach stand out, something that goes beyond effectiveness. And that's what we're going to look at next. Let's talk about something most people don't think about until it becomes a problem. Cost, not just money, but long-term cost. Every time you buy a bottle of pesticide, you're paying for a temporary solution, something that needs to be replaced again and again. At first, it doesn't seem like much. one bottle here, another a few weeks later. But over a full growing season, it adds up, and not just financially. There's also the cost of exposure, the uncertainty of using something you wouldn't want on your skin, let alone on something you plan to eat. There's the constant question in the back of your mind, is this safe? And even after all that, the results are often inconsistent. Now compare that to what you're using here. A simple ingredient, something inexpensive, something you probably already have, combined with a few basic additions. You're not buying into a system, you're creating your own, and that changes the relationship completely. Because now, instead of depending on products, you understand the process. You know what's happening, you know why it works, and that gives you control. There's also something else that matters more than people realize. Confidence. When you know exactly what to do, when to do it, and why it works, you stop second-guessing every decision. You don't panic when you see a few insects. You don't rush to buy something new. You respond calmly. And that calm response is what keeps your garden stable. Now imagine this over time. Fewer infestations. Healthier plants, less stress, lower cost. It's not just about killing pests anymore. It's about creating a system that supports your garden instead of constantly reacting to problems. And once you reach that point, gardening feels different. It becomes predictable, manageable, even enjoyable again. But before we finish, there's one last thing to bring everything together. A simple recap that locks in the most important parts. Because when you remember these, everything else becomes easier. Before you move on and try this yourself, let's bring everything back to the core ideas that actually make this work. Because in the end, it's not about remembering every detail. It's about understanding the few things that matter most. First, the solution only works when it's balanced. Not too strong, not too weak. Just enough to affect the pests without stressing the plant. This is where many people go wrong. They think stronger means faster results. But in reality, balance is what creates consistency. Second, coverage is everything. If you miss the underside of the leaves, you're missing the heart of the problem. That's where pests hide, feed and multiply. Spraying only what you see is like cleaning half a surface and expecting it to stay clean. The hidden areas matter more than the visible ones. Third, timing protects your plant. Applying this during cooler parts of the day allows the plant to absorb and respond without stress. When you respect that timing, you avoid damage and get better results from the same exact mixture. Fourth, repetition breaks the cycle. One application is not a solution, it's a start. The follow-up sprays are what interrupt the life cycle and prevent the next wave from taking over. This is the step that turns temporary relief into real control. And finally, awareness keeps everything stable. When you stay observant, you catch problems early. Small issues are easy to handle. Large infestations are not. That one habit, just paying attention, can save you hours of work later. When you combine these 5 ideas, something shifts. You're no longer reacting randomly. You're following a simple system, and simple systems, when done right, are incredibly powerful. Now take a moment and think about your own plants, the ones that have been struggling, the ones you've tried to fix before, the ones you almost gave up on. Imagine applying this method properly, not rushed, not guessed, but done with intention. You don't need perfect conditions, you don't need expensive tools, you just need to follow what works. And when you do, the results are not subtle. They're visible, cleaner leaves, stronger growth. Fewer pests returning, that's the difference between effort and effective effort. And once you see that difference, you don't go back. At this point, you have everything you need. A simple ingredient, a clear method, a short cycle, and a way to prevent the problem from returning. There's nothing complicated here, but there is one final step that determines whether this actually changes anything for you. Action. Because information alone doesn't fix a plant, application does. So the next time you see those early signs, tiny insects, curling leaves, sticky residue, you won't feel that same frustration. You'll recognize it, you'll know exactly what to do, and instead of waiting, you'll act immediately. That's how control starts. Not by reacting late, but by responding early. And once you do this a few times, it becomes second nature. You stop seeing pests as a major threat. They become manageable, predictable, something you can handle without stress. That's the real goal. Not perfection, but control. So now it's your turn. Take what you've learned and put it into practice. Mix the solution carefully. Apply it the right way. Follow through with the cycle. Give it a fair chance and watch what happens. Because when you finally see your plants clean, healthy, and growing without constant attack, you'll realize something simple but powerful. You didn't need stronger chemicals. You just needed a smarter approach. And once you have that, everything in your garden starts to change. Your plants respond, your confidence grows. And gardening becomes what it was supposed to be from the start. Simple, effective, and deeply satisfying.